Hi, and welcome to my super simple sport build video. I had a lot of requests for plans. What I did is I wrote dimensions on my templates so that people can copy these, create their own templates, and then I'll show how it's all built from start to finish. Some notes about the templates. Here you can see the dimensions. The front of the fuselage is called FOF, and that's this front right here. These red areas, those are areas where you cut halfway through the foam, peel the foam off, and then glue and wrap the paper around the edge. And it's just there. It makes it a little tougher, lasts a little bit longer. It's not so important in this area here. It is important on the top, it adds strength, and on the bottom where it adds strength. So I'm just gonna go, if you come along here, you can pause the video to take dimensions. I showed the start of where the rudder servo can go, and we cut it to whatever servo you use. I used 9-gram servos. Try to keep it as light as possible so they're not metal gear. Up here where it says French curve, you can just hand draw something like that that looks like that, kind of a nice smooth arc. Down here, this is kind of an extra long paper fold over with glue because we'll put a dowel in there, and that'll be the tail skid. The rudder here is shown this way because when you attach it to the plane, it goes on after everything else is assembled. And that way the control horn is on the hinge side. So here we are in the plan view. The same with the front of fuselage, FOF. There's also I have double arrows, for example here, that go to the center line of the fuselage. Come out here. This is 90 degrees. So you can just do a 90 degree and do the dimensions to, this is where the doubler for the top and bottom of the wing go. This is, the wing end of the aileron hinge point. Come back here. This is a 9-gram servo outlet cut out. You can just trace your servo given some dimensions. This line here is parallel to your aileron line. I put these are what I use for transfer. I use these little triangles, and then I can draw. When I copy, I can get the straight lines there. In this area here is for a dowel. This is a small dowel, barbecue skewer, kind of a small one. I put here where you cut, 50% cut, dig out the foam, and then glue that in. I try to do that before I cover it in tape, just hides it better. So this is the wing doubler. We're gonna make a right, left, top and bottom version. So kind of have to flip it over. I'll show you that when I do the layout. It's got a 5mm bezel. That's this green area here. And that'll give some taper to the leading edge. And then here is the motor mount. It's a 45mm by 45mm square, and then I kind of just cut off the corners here for looks and a little bit of weight. And I guess the most interesting thing here is, since the fuselage vertically is double thick, I offset this dowel hole here by 1.5 millimeters. That way it goes into the center of the foam. Go one way on one direction, one way on the other. The horizontal ones are in line. That's a single thickness of foam. And what else can I say about that? Oh, you can see an outline of your motor mount. So I just centered the motor mount and drew an outline. Whatever motor mount you use, just stick it on there and use that as a template. Okay, move on to laying it out. Okay, so I've taken the template and I've put it on some foam. Now I'm just gonna do some outlines here. Okay. Now what I'll do here is I will cut this out, flip this template over, do the other side of the fuselage, and I will glue them together before I do the final cutout here. Try to keep it perpendicular as much as you can. Let's do the other side. Okay, I'm gonna warm up the glue gun and get ready to glue these two sides together. Okay, the glue gun is ready. I am going to glue these sides together. I'm gonna use some tape and kind of get them aligned beforehand. sure you got glue and plenty of glue in your gun, and it's nice and hot. A piece of scrap would be good here, but off this and then hold it for. My camera glitched, so I didn't get the rough cut on video, but here's the essential piece. You can see that I've left a few millimeters around the perimeter and essentially cut out the plan view of the plane. So now I will put in the dowel down here in the tail and then cover it. Now I'm going to cut the slot for the dowel in the tail. This dowel strengthens the tail here. Try to keep it straight under pressure. And it's not very heavy. Now for the glue. Let that dry for about a minute. A little reminder before covering, it's easier to put these red and blue or green lines for the hinge line in the elevator and in the ailerons before covering. It's just a little easier. Try to get the plane as flat on the table as possible. Now that I've covered the back with white, I'm now going to cover the top, or I should say the bottom with white. Now I'm going to cover the top with 3 colors. I'm going to go black up front, white in the middle, and red in the back. So I'm going to put down the white first because the red, and the black will be put on the doubler, but the red will go over the white without leaving a seam. So I've transferred some marks from the bottom up to the top so that I can get it placed where I want it to be. And I overlap about 1/8 of an inch or less For the red, I put down this steel rule so that I don't overlap that much. I can cut a clean line. Okay, now that covered the top and the bottom with tape, it's time to do the final cuts on the perimeters, do the ailerons, the elevator, all that kind of stuff. So do a fresh blade. Well, I realized after cutting my elevator that I forgot to put my black up here. So let's do that. Now it's time to cut the bevel on the aileron and the elevator. We're going to get a nice big angle on that blade. Try not to cut through the paper on the top surface. Just follow that green line. Now I usually end up leaving a little beaky here, and so I come back and just kind of take that out. And then make sure you cut that. That's a pretty good deflection. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for the elevator and the other aileron. Okay, this one is ready. It's all cut. Got all the tabs will need to be glued over, etc. But I want to do the wing doublers before I put glue on this. Okay, time to lay out the doublers. Try to make sure it's roughly square, pretty square. Okay. Okay, I'm going to use the straight edge to help sure these are lined up when I glue them together here. Let those dry for about a minute. Now that the glue in the center is set, time to cover the top and bottom. Now time to do the final trims and put the barbecue here. I prepared the top doubler, the bottom doubler, or tripler if you want to call it that. And I just wanted to point out a few things that may not be that clear on the plan or just are kind of optional. For one thing, the barbecue skewer, this is a larger barbecue skewer. It's about 4 millimeters in diameter versus 3 millimeters in diameter. Note that the servos actually go in the bottom wing doubler, not as I'm about to state in the top, which I accidentally do, and then I show how to repair that. For the top wing, I prepared some servos, centered them, put in the arm, and I am going to glue them in now before I put it into the fuselage, wing, etc. And I'm going to do that because that way I can leave the tape and paper in this area, and it just comes with a cleaner look. Now, if you don't have the servo, you don't want to wait, just cut it all the way out. You'll be able to see the top of the servo. I'm using black here, so it really wouldn't matter that much anyway. And you can always, cover it if it's really important to you. What else? I wanted to point out that on the bottom, I have marked my CG. So that comes from the plan. Also, for the servo, it won't go through 3, it'll just barely go into this. So this just needs to fit a little bit like that. So you don't really need to cut out that big slot in the top. It's up to you, it doesn't really matter. And also, you don't have to go all the way through the paper. You can just leave it like this and it'll be a better look on the bottom. Hold it for there a few seconds. These edges are important. These actually add some stiffness to the wing as well. So make sure it's nice and flat. Okay, the bottom doubler and the top doubler are now fully prepared, ready for installation. Now it's time to do the wraps on the main fuselage wing's tail. I'm going to start with the tail. This one I usually do for leading edges. I usually run my fingernail like this, the back of my fingernail, just to try to crush it down a little bit on both sides, just to get a little bit pointier. And sometimes I do it on these sides just because it looks better, but I think it's really only needed on the front leading edge. of stabilizers and wings. Okay, and now let's go ahead and put plenty of glue ready. And for this, I take a piece of paper or scrap foam. And wrap it over, moving the foam slightly just in case there's glue on it, so it doesn't stick as much as possible. Sometimes there's not enough, you don't get enough glue that this edge will poke up in this case. And that's when I put a little bit more glue here. Again. Okay. The other thing I wanted to show was make sure you reinforce the hinge with glue. You're just trying to make sure the top paper doesn't delaminate and pull apart. So be pretty sparing with the glue and wipe out as much as you can. And then just let that rest open for about a minute. So I'm going to do that, then I'm going to finish wrapping and doing the aileron hinges as well. Okay, it's now time to glue the top of the wing on, doubler. I've just pre-fitted. I needed to trim the servo holes just a little bit. But now I need to just go for it. Try to get it on thick because then it takes longer to dry. And I'm not going to worry about the back edge so much because I'm going to come back with another bead of glue. Okay. I want to hold this for probably a minute and a half. So now I'm going to add a bead of glue to the back edge here. Try to get a little bit more strength. Okay, that went pretty well, which is a little unfortunate because I realize I don't want the servos coming out the top. I want them to go out the bottom. So now I have to try to fix it and not make it look terrible. I could just leave them coming out the top, but I don't think fixing it's going to be that terrible. Denatured alcohol works well for debonding. So denatured alcohol is cheap, but for debonding that servo in there, I'm going to try to just put some, see if I can get that in there. Put a little pressure on the servo and see if I can get it. I can actually feel it soaking down. Just put some pressure on the servo and see if I can get it to pop up. Now I'll still have to do something about the wire. There we go. This will now go in the bottom wing. cover the hole that I put up there with black tape. Okay, after accidentally putting the servos in the upper wing doubler, I've now popped them out, as you saw with the denatured alcohol, and just test fitted them in the bottom, and we're ready to go now with them in the bottom. Okay, after wrapping the leading edge some black tape and putting a little bit of patch over the hole, barely see it, the plan view of the plane is done. Time to work on the fuselage. All right, so the next step for the fuselage is to use the templates to outline them on the foam. One thing to remember is that it's double thick, so you need 2 of each of these parts. Since I'm going to cover before I do the final cut, I'm going to make it right-left. In other words, I'm going to flip each one of these over. So here are the 4 pieces of the fuselage. These are very simple, easy to lay out, and I thought of another good reason to do right-left, because if there's a bend in the board a little bit, when you put them together, they'll tend to cancel out. So now I'm going to cover, and then I'll do my final cut. So here we've got the fuselage and rudder all taped and glued, and yeah, final cuts, all that was done. Here I've test fitted it all together, the fuselage, make sure the tabs are nesting properly and everything. I didn't have to make any adjustments there, it just worked. But so the next step will be to glue the tops together, glue the bottoms together, and after that I'll glue them to the plan view, top first. Now time to glue the halves together. I've got my heavier hot glue gun. The glue is very hot, so it'll give me more working time. And I'm going to concentrate on the front and the back and make sure they're nicely aligned. Since there's so much glue there, hold this for 1.5 minutes. Okay, I've put some scrap underneath the front here and underneath the back here because of the wing doubler to make sure this is flat against the table before I glue this in, the top in. I'm also going to squish the tabs down to help them go in a little easier. And I may require some adjustments here. I'm finding I need to cut this tab off. It's an adjustment I made from the previous, first run. So I'm going to cut this tab off here. Again. That's better. Okay. So that seems to fit very well. I'm going to get a 90-degree angle. Here's the change to the plan for that tab I needed to cut off. That for a minute and a half. So now I'm going to move on to the firewall, and decided I'll go ahead and show landing gear installation as well. And I still need to do the rudder, so I'll do that as well. I use Blenderm tape. It's a 3M product. Don't know if you can actually see, it says Blenderm. To tape on the hinge, to be the hinge, and tape on the rudder. It's really easy to work with. You can come on and off several times without any problems. So first I will put it on the rudder side. Like I said, it's easy to pull on and off, but it's also very durable. I took a look at the tail opening to figure out about where I want the tape to be. Okay. Bend it out of the way a little bit. So open this up as wide as it can be. There we go. Right, so this is a single thickness rudder, but it's going on 2 thicknesses of foam. Okay. Make sure it's basically stuck to the, almost to the other tape on the other side of the aileron, or the elevator, or rudder. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to do the bottom. Okay. All right, that's the tail hinge. Now I'll put the tail skid in. So this is, I cut the paper off one side. It's about 4 inches long. And I wanted it to extend about that far out. Next is the motor mount. So I've got the motor mount here. Test fit it. Test looks good. You want to get it flush in there. Looks like there might be a little bit of something holding that up. A little bit of glue. Okay. Looks pretty good. And don't skimp on the glue here. And then hold this in. This is a critical joint, so hold it in for a good 1.5 minutes. So I've cut these dowels. They're about 1.5 inches, 40 millimeters long. These are what I'm going to use to secure the motor mount into the foam. I also have a little sharpened spike here to help do the first penetrations. Make sure you get it nice and parallel with the foam so it doesn't go sticking out anywhere. Okay. I can feel it and kind of see it there. Twist a little bit. There we go. I'll put a little glue in there. Doesn't interfere with anything, so it doesn't have to be completely flush. Slide on one stroke. Okay, so there is the engine mount. I did put some pre-drill a little bit of holes, a few holes there for the motor mount. So that goes in just with some wood screws a little bit later. This is the landing gear reinforcement detail. It's half a popsicle stick reinforced on either side of the fuselage. Each stick has a hole about 10 millimeters from the end. Helps keep it from splitting while you're drilling it. And the reinforcement lines up with the leading edge of the wing. So depending on how strong you want your landing gear, you can use the bigger dowel or the smaller dowel. I'm using the smaller dowel for this one. If necessary, if it breaks, you can always go back and use the bigger dowel. So line up these reinforcements effectively with the leading edge. I'm just gonna glue it on right there. Trying to get it down and then hold it on there for about 30 seconds. Now that that glue is dried, I am going to locate the other side. Kind of go perpendicular here. Hold this for about 30 seconds. Spin the rods in there so they don't get stuck. If anything breaks, it'll be these little barbecue skewers. The rest is on there pretty tight. So this is a wire, I think about 1.5 millimeter in diameter. I am going to mark the middle. Now I'm going to measure the thickness here, which is 14 millimeters. Go 90 degrees. Try to get them in line with each other. These landing gear are pretty flimsy. They're just here to try to reduce the amount of prop breakage in my book. So I'm going to mark this. Again, go about 90 degrees. Hold that on, and then now I need to mark this about here and we need to put a little bit onto the wheels. And I picked these wheels up from Hobby King for, I think, 5 for 61 cents. Measure 100 millimeters out. They don't lie exactly flat, so I'll tweak it there. Tweak this one a little bit. Okay. I think I'm going to call this the build. I'll show final installation of the gear or the radio, etc. details on the other. I'm going to wrap this up with the radio installation, etc. Review of the specs. This is from a Flitetest B-Pack. This is a 945 prop, 2212 motor, 1050 kV, 1 3/4 inch spinner here from Hobby King. It's very, I think, less than $2. And let's see what else we got here. So you can see the V-Good 20 amp ESC, very lightweight, very happy with those, 15 grams. It's my receiver, and I've got a Race Day Quads battery hold down. I don't know if you can see it here, but there's a popsicle stick. I've colored it black with a magic marker. That reinforces the battery. Like I said, you kind of have to play with this rubber band to get the gear to lay the way you want it. I use these Flitetest control horns. They're very large for these large surfaces. Works great with one of these clevises, so you can dial in the location really well. Rudder servo, Flitetest 9 gram. What else do we have here? So for the rudder, use a tie wrap, small tie wrap, to support the 1.2 millimeter control rod. Have to make sure you get a little bit of a bend in it. That way when you push on it, it works well. Using the classic Flitetest wooden control horns in the rear for both the elevator and the rudder. For the most part, I think that's it. Again, I really like the way this flies. So my plan is when I crash this beyond repair, I will put it into this plane and keep going, learning. Thanks. If you watched this whole video, thanks. I hope you build one of these super simple sport models and enjoy it as much as I do.